You know, the basics of business are pretty simple, right? You buy something, you sell it for more. Easy. But what happens when you don't just buy the product? What if you actually make it from scratch? Well, that's where things get really interesting, and a whole new world of accounting opens up. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and demystify the manufacturing account. All right, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to start by comparing a simple shop to a factory. Then we'll get into the three main costs of making anything. After that, we'll follow how those costs move through the business, take a look at the main financial statement itself, see how it all fits into the big picture, and finally, we'll talk about why any of this really matters. So, first things first, why on earth do manufacturers need this special account anyway? To really get it, let's put two very different businesses side by side, your average retail shop and a manufacturing factory. And this slide right here nails the fundamental difference. On one hand, you have a trading business, a shop. It's basically a middleman. It buys products that are already made and just sells them. But a manufacturing business, it's a creator. It buys raw materials like wood or steel or flour and transforms them into something completely new. And that process, that act of transformation, is exactly where all the complexity is. There are so many costs involved beyond just buying the raw material. So you need a specific tool just to track every single penny that goes into making that final product. And that tool, my friends, is the manufacturing account. Okay, so now that we know why we need this account, let's dig into what actually goes into it. Think of these as the fundamental building blocks of production. Every single thing that gets manufactured, I don't care if it's a supercomputer or a simple cupcake, is made up of these three core costs. First up, and it's the most obvious one, is the cost of your raw materials. This is the actual physical stuff that becomes your product. It's the wood for a table, the cotton for a t-shirt, the cocoa beans for chocolate. It's the core ingredient. Next, you need people to turn that raw material into something useful. That's your labor cost. Now, specifically, this is for the workers who are hands-on, the ones on the factory floor, the people operating the machines, working the assembly line, anyone directly involved in the creation process. And finally, we have factory overhead. You can think of this as the big catch-all bucket for every other cost that's needed to run the factory. We're talking about the factory manager's salary, the electricity bill to run the machines, the rent on the building, even the oil to lubricate the equipment. If it happens in the factory, but it's not a direct material or direct labor, it's overhead. This table makes that distinction crystal clear. Let's imagine we're building a wooden chair. The wood itself, that's a direct material cost, obviously. But what about the glue and the nails? They're part of the chair, but they're considered indirect materials, so they get lumped into overhead. Same thing with labor. The wage for the person actually cutting the wood is a direct labor cost, but their supervisor, who oversees the entire floor, that's an indirect labor cost, and it also goes into overhead. See the difference? Okay, so we have our ingredients, materials, labor, and overhead. Now let's see how they all come together. We're going to follow the financial journey of a product as it goes from just a pile of raw materials to a finished item ready to sell. Now here is another huge difference from a regular shop. A retail store has just one type of inventory, the stuff on its shelves ready to be sold. A factory, on the other hand, is much more dynamic. It's juggling three different kinds of inventory all at once. First, you've got your raw materials inventory. That's all the wood, the steel, the fabric just sitting in the warehouse waiting to be used. Then you've got work in process inventory. These are the half-built chairs, the partially assembled engines. They're literally in the middle of being transformed. And finally, you have your finished goods inventory. The completed products, all shiny and new, ready to be shipped out. And what's really cool is that the accounting system perfectly mimics the physical journey of the product. The costs literally flow from the raw materials account, then into the work in process account as you add labor and overhead in the factory. And finally, they land in the finished goods account once the product is complete. So, the very first step in this whole chain is figuring out exactly how much raw material you used up. The formula is actually pretty simple. You just take whatever you started with, you add all the new materials you bought, and then you subtract whatever you had left over at the end. What's left? That's the cost of the materials that actually went into production. So all of these pieces we've been talking about, the three costs, the flow-through inventory, they all come together in one very important document, the Statement of Cost of Goods Manufactured. And this is it. This is the grand summary. This statement of cost of goods manufactured pulls together all those production costs we talked about, materials used, direct labor, and all that factory overhead. Now, it can look a little intimidating, but its main job is really simple. Take all of those costs, make a few adjustments, and calculate one final crucial number. So what happens to that final number? Where does it go? Well, now we zoom out and see how this one statement fits into the bigger financial picture, specifically how it connects to the profit and loss statement. Okay, let's use an example to make this real. Let's say the final number from our manufacturing statement is 600,000 Malaysian ringgit. This number represents the total cost of all the products that were fully completed during that time period. So just remember that number, 600,000. And here is the magic connection. That 600,000 figure gets picked up and plugged directly into the main profit and loss statement. It becomes the key ingredient for calculating the cost of goods sold, which is the big expense you subtract from your sales to figure out your profit. So the manufacturing statement literally feeds the P&L. Phew, okay, that's a lot of accounting, I get it. But you might be wondering, why go through all this trouble? Why separate everything so carefully? What's the actual real-world value here? Well, it really all boils down to this. For a manufacturer, this detailed tracking is absolutely vital for survival. It lets them cleanly separate the costs of making things from all the other costs of running a business, like marketing or HR. This is critical for setting prices. I mean, think about it. How can you possibly know what to charge for a chair if you don't know exactly what it cost you to make it? It's also essential for managing efficiency, spotting waste, and of course, providing a clear and defensible number for the tax authorities. And I'll leave you with this question to chew on. If you were the factory owner and you could see exactly how much you were spending on materials, on labor, even on electricity for each and every product you make, what decisions would you make differently? Because understanding your costs isn't just about accounting, it's the very foundation of building a smarter, more efficient, and more profitable business.